Brain freeze. How the amygdala hijack turns experts into novices. We've all seen it. Maybe you've even lived it. An alarm blares, a machine malfunctions, or a critical safety incident begins to unfold in slow motion. You look at the person in charge, someone with 20 years of experience, a wall full of certifications, and a reputation for being the cool head on the floor. And they're frozen. They aren't moving. They aren't shouting orders. They are staring at the crisis with wide, glassy eyes as if they've never seen a piece of equipment in their life. In safety circles, we often call this human error or panic. In neuroscience, we call it the amygdala hijack, the security guard versus the CEO. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the architecture of the brain, specifically what we call the Threshold 2.2 integration of safety science. Your brain has two primary ways of processing information: the high road and the low road. The high road, prefrontal cortex. Think of this as the CEO of your brain. This is where logic, reasoning, complex decision-making, and all that expensive training you've done is stored. It's sophisticated, but it's slow. The low road, amygdala. This is the security guard. Its only job is to scan the environment for things that might kill you. It's primitive, reactive, and incredibly fast. When a sensory input, like the sound of a structural failure, hits the thalamus, the brain's relay station, it sends the signal to both the CEO and the security guard. However, the path to the security guard, the amygdala, is much shorter. In a high-stress emergency, the amygdala receives the signal first. If it perceives a significant threat, it doesn't wait for the CEO to weigh the pros and cons. It initiates a hijack. It floods the system with cortisol and adrenaline, spikes the heart rate, and, crucially, it shuts down the prefrontal cortex. It literally cuts the power to the part of the brain that knows how to handle the emergency. So why have my years of fieldwork taught me to respect the hijack? Over the course of my career, I've been on the ground for more than 50 fatality investigations. When you spend that much time looking at the why behind the what, you start to see a pattern that isn't in the official reports. In almost every one of those cases, there was a moment where someone should have known better. The procedures were written down. The worker had been trained. The safety gear was within reach, but in the split second where life met death, the knowledge was inaccessible. I remember investigating an incident where an operator with 15 years of experience bypassed a lockout-tagout procedure he had performed 1,000 times. When we looked at the sequence of events, he wasn't being lazy. He was under extreme production pressure. He was exhausted, and a minor equipment trip triggered a stress response. His brain moved from the high road of safety protocol to the low road of fix it now. In that state of amygdala hijack, his 15 years of expertise didn't exist. He was functioning with the cognitive capacity of a terrified beginner. This is the fatalities gap. We train people for the high road, but they die on the low road. You might ask, what's the science of the freeze? Why do some people fight or flee, while others simply freeze? When the amygdala takes over, it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis. This is a chemical cascade that prepares the body for action. However, if the brain perceives the threat as escapable, you get fight or flight. If the brain perceives the threat as overwhelming or inevitable, it triggers the freeze response, a state of hypervigilance where the body becomes immobile to avoid detection or because it simply cannot compute a path forward. During this freeze, the blood flow is actually redirected. It moves away from the prefrontal cortex and toward the large muscle groups in the legs and arms. Your brain is literally starving your thinking center of the oxygen and glucose it needs to function. This is why traditional safety training fails. We spend 90% of our time putting information into the prefrontal cortex through PowerPoints and manuals. But in an emergency, that part of the brain is the first thing to go offline. We are training a CEO who won't be in the building when the fire starts. Let's look at how to put this in action. The science to life bridge, or basically how to unfreeze. If we know the brain is wired to hijack itself, how do we fix it? We can't change human evolution, but we can use neuroplasticity to build better bypasses. 1. Tactical breathing. The biological override. You've heard of box breathing, but do you know why it works for safety? Deep rhythmic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, which sends a signal back to the amygdala saying, "The environment is safe enough for us to breathe slowly." It is a manual override that forces the security guard to stand down, allowing the CEO to come back online. 2. High-fidelity stress priming. If you only train in a classroom, the amygdala will always view the real-world emergency as a brand new threat. We need to train in environments that mimic the sensory load of a real crisis, the noise, the heat, the pressure. This is called stress inoculation. By exposing the brain to controlled levels of stress, we teach the amygdala that this specific threat is actually a task. 3. The halt audit. The amygdala is much more likely to trigger a hijack if the brain is already depleted. Research shows that being hungry, angry, lonely, or disconnected, or tired significantly lowers the threshold for a hijack. Science to life tip. If you are heading into a high-risk task and you haven't slept or eaten, your CEO is already on vacation. You are operating on a hair trigger. Shifting the culture from blame to biology. When we understand the neuroscience of the brain freeze, our approach to safety management has to change. We can't just tell people to pay more attention. We have to design systems that account for the fact that, at some point, their brain will fail them. This means simplifying emergency controls. If a stop button requires a 3-step cognitive process, it's a bad design. It needs to be a big, red, low-road, friendly button. Psychological safety. When people are afraid of their bosses, their amygdala is already partially activated. A culture of fear is a culture of constant mini-hijacks, which leads to stupid mistakes by smart people. Neural warm-ups, starting a shift with a mental rehearsal of what-if scenarios primes the prefrontal cortex and creates a neural map for the amygdala to follow if things go sideways. The bottom line. The brain freeze isn't a character flaw. It's a biological certainty. The next time you see someone stumble during a high-pressure moment, or the next time you find yourself staring blankly at a problem you know how to solve, remember, your security guard is just trying to protect you. The goal of modern safety science isn't to prevent the hijack. It's to build the neural pathways that allow us to find our way back to the high road before the freeze becomes a fatality. Choosing better words, practicing better breathing, and understanding our own biology isn't just wellness stuff. It's the highest level of technical expertise there is, because the most important piece of safety equipment you own is the 3-pound organ between your ears, and it's time we learned how to keep the power on.